world in a different way to the way I see it. And for me, living in autism world, with all the kids who he grew up with their families, just thinking about climate change and what it's doing to the earth makes me really emotional. It's emotional when I think about my son living for 35 or 40 years after I die, without me there. And what does that mean? And in that time, things will be much worse. It'll be much tougher. And that's me, someone without a disability, who lives with people with disabilities. And I can only imagine the impacts for people who do have the disabilities. I think about the floods in Lismore, a lovely town that I've been to many times in New South Wales, flooded disastrously 3 times in 18 months. And I think about what it would be like if I struggled to understand what was going on, if I had an acquired brain injury, if I was in a wheelchair, if I needed a carer and the carer wasn't there at that particular moment. So I'm incredibly proud of this event. I would like to thank the Australian Government delegation for making space for this conversation. I think this is, for me, the most important moment in my time in these discussions about how we look at climate change and how we make it people-focused. So I'm just going to quickly introduce you to our esteemed panel. As you can see, we have a couple of people dialing in from around the world. I'll start with Jeff Smith. Jeff is the CEO of Disability Advocacy Network Australia. He's got over 20 years' experience in disability and environmental law and policy. I've worked with him at various times over the last 20 plus years. He is a fierce advocate. I would hate to be on the other side of any debate with Jeff. Next to Jeff, Jeff is in Sydney. Next to Jeff is Jason, based in New Zealand. I met Jason last year in Egypt, and he is an extraordinary advocate for on disability. He's a co-founder of social impact agency Activate and the Sustainability, Disability and Climate Network, which is a growing network of disabled people. And our representative organisations particularly focused on forming a disabled constituency at the UNFCCC. He consults on climate justice and disability rights related policy and strategic advice with NGOs and government agencies. He's a climate reality leader, a board member of Disabled Persons Assembly New Zealand, and co-author of Nothing About Us Without Us, a really seminal work. Climate Change and Disability Justice, edited by the former Prime Minister Helen Clark. We have Amina in the centre there. Amina was born and brought up in Nigeria. She became paralysed at the age of 13 following a car accident. Amina is the founder of the Rebuilding Hope on Wheels initiative in Nigeria and a strong advocate on disability rights. Closest to me, we have Daniel. Daniel is a shaper of the Caracas Hub, Venezuela. Daniel works with the International Disability Alliance and RIADIS?
RIADIS.
Yes.
Latin American Network of People with Disability and their families in Latin America.
Wonderful. He has his own startup in assistive technology as well. And over to our far left is Rima Misa. Rima's the director of the, I'm going to say this incorrectly, how do you say it? You're the director of the?
Disabled organization in Tonga.
Yes. I knew I'd struggle with the language, I apologise. He's currently a member of the Pacific Disability Forum and a board member of the Pacific Women Lead under SPC, funded by the Government of Australia. And the Government of Australia plays a really important role in this and should be acknowledged for its strong efforts in helping support disabled people, not just in Australia, but around our region. I want to start by giving as much time, because I've spoken for a long time now, more longer than I'd hoped. I want to start by asking Jeff, as our nominal Australian. Jeff, why is this an important moment for you, having this event at the Australian Pavilion at the COP?
Thank you, Glenn. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. All right, we're struggling to hear you at that end, but so I just wanted to check. Why is this an important event? It's very exciting, I must say. There are a number of people who have been working for some time to draw attention to the intersections between climate change and disability, including my colleague Jason Boberg here, who I think it's fair to say has taken a great deal of the lead over the last few years, but also to establish the infrastructure to deal with the issues around those intersections. So yes, it is great to finally get some traction on this issue, and it is a very pivotal moment, I think, because the resolve in this space to draw attention to those intersections really comes from the premise that people with disability are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and that is in a whole range of ways. It can be in terms of emergency responses and what that looks like, in that they may be shut out of the planning processes. It may be in the disaster response that they are, that the evacuation centres are inaccessible, or the communications around those particular disaster events are not accessible, which of course can have catastrophic consequences for people with disability. So there's a set of issues around emergency response. There's a set of issues around, there are many conditions where, for example, the heat-related impacts can disproportionately impact on people with disability, whether that be spinal cord injuries or multiple sclerosis, diabetes, and so on and so forth. And in that context, we are being told by the World Health Organization that heat-related deaths are likely to increase fivefold by 2050 at the current rate that we're going. So even in that statistic there, then people with disability will be disproportionately impacted in and of itself. Climate change can also exacerbate inequities, and we've seen that in an Australian context. Even just in New South Wales, we had the floods in Lismore and the fires down the south coast, and the people who didn't have the resources to punch their way out of those disasters have spiralled downwards oftentimes as a result of those disasters. And of course, people with disability are more likely to live on the poverty line. And finally, of course, climate change can cause disability as well, and I think that it's important to realise that in the framing of these issues. But I notice that I'm out of time, so I'll just leave it there for the moment. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Jeff. Very disciplined of you. Where I live in Western Sydney, the other day was in the mid-40 degrees. And I spoke to my son, he really struggled, and he's safe and well protected and looked after. It's really tough. It's really tough. I'll hand to Jason, who, as Jeff has pointed out, has been an international leader in bringing this to the fore. Jason, what are you hoping to see in coming years from the UNFCCC and these forums? Oops. Yeah, there you go.
Kia ora, Glenn. It's Jason here. Funnily enough, I've turned on the captions on Zoom and it's transcribing for you so I can read them, but I can't hear anything that's being said on stage. So that's a great step forward for accessibility to start off the conversation. So I'll assume that you've asked the right question and try and respond to that. But yeah, totally right, and it's a fantastic thing that this event's happening today in the Australian Pavilion. And Jeff's talked about some of the very real impacts and implications for people with disability and disabled people when these events happen. So yeah, I might just talk a bit more about what we're hoping to see in the UNFCCC and why. So we established the Sustainability, Disability and Climate Network as an outcome of COP23 in Bonn, with the goal of advocating and laying down the groundwork for disabled people's constituency with the UNFCCC. So that's really the core perspective that I'm bringing in. And while, of course, any accredited person or organisation has equal access to participate in the COPs, being acknowledged and formalised as a constituency for our grouping for all disabled people is really important, so we can collectively organise and we can advocate for disability rights and inclusion in the UNFCCC more strongly. I think at this point in COP, probably everybody here knows how huge a challenge it is just to get cut through on important issues when we're one of tens of thousands of voices, and having a constituency to bring us all together as people with disabilities and allies to help build power would maximise our impact and get critical access to opportunities and elevate disability rights. So that's something that we're really, really keen on, and we're really proud to have been able to help get that on the agenda. And that we've had some really great process with the UNFCCC Secretariat over the last few years on that, but it continues to be a really important way to solidify the wins we've already got on the ground, like the ability to do high-level statements, have daily meeting rooms or caucus, and interventions with the Executive Secretariat. I've got 2 or 3 other quick points as well around where we're really keen to see the UNFCCC system head and some wins that we'd like to see come out of this forum. And one of those is to raise the bar on equal access to the system in a whole for disabled people within the UNFCCC. So that might be things like extra time for speaking slots, captioning and sign language being a minimum accessibility that is supported by the UNFCCC, or increasing physical accessibility within the venue around longer lines that people are forced to stand in. Zones, all zones are wheelchair accessible, and making sure that's something, because it's important to realise that disabled people do exist in the blue zone, and we should be catering to all of our needs to be able to engage on equal footing here. And ensuring that some of those fast-paced structures of the negotiation make some room for a range of access requirements. Some of those things I've mentioned are under the scope of the UNFCCC Secretariat, but some fall under the scope of the host country. And great accessibility provisions should really be written into host countries' agreements. It's not sufficient to simply contract this kind of work out to people who don't have long-term experience of navigating the COPs and the unique ways of COP spaces and how they function for disabled people. And so on this line, I was really grateful to be involved facilitating the disability engagement, supporting the draft disability rights and inclusion aspects of this year's host country agreement, so where everybody is now in Dubai. And that was a first that's happened, to work with other disabled people with disability organisations with the UNFCCC to see what should be included in that agreement. But this needs to be a standard way going forward, and it needs to be really strengthened to include forcible targets, so disabled people are able to be actively involved in sharing our lived experiences and requirements to create a fully accessible and inclusive COP. And I would say that this is critical for any would-be host countries, especially in our region, that might be thinking about hosting a COP, say COP31. And very quickly on the technical side, within the UNFCCC, we really need to see better operationalised the disability rights in the text. It was a great win we had at COP27 to ensure that under ACE there was a reporting mechanism for disabled youth in that operational text, but that takes a lot of coordinated work together, and allies who really take up and incorporate disability ask into their own campaigning. So massive thanks to our allies from other constituencies like Women and Gender, Indigenous Peoples, and of course Cam International to help get that across the line. And this is something that we really need more of, including really supporting countries like Australia and New Zealand, who are signatories to the UNCRPD as well as the UNFCCC, and leveraging our domestic legislation for that. There's a real opportunity for our region to lead the integration here between the UNFCCC and the UNCRPD. And finally, we need to get a disability and climate action plan off the ground within the UNFCCC, which is something that we've been long calling for, just like the gender action plan. And this is needed to mainstream disability rights across the UNFCCC and provide a strong platform for change. And it was great we got some support from the New Zealand Minister for Climate Change, James Shaw, last year behind that. And to finally sum up, so we need the disabled people's constituency to be formally recognised. We need to raise the standard for accessibility of equal participation between the UNFCCC and the host countries. We need greater inclusion of disability rights in the authorizational text, and specifically we need a disability and climate action plan. So those are some things that I'm really hoping to see happen or come to fruition in the next few years in the UNFCCC.
Thank you, Jason. Now we'll go to the three wonderful people we have here from around the world. Firstly, congratulations getting here. I know it's hard for me to get here, but the barriers for so many people to get to this event are so much greater when you're disabled. Finding the resources. You need extra resources. Yeah? Even just organising today was really great with the people who organise these forums. Just getting a ramp onto this stage is an effort. I can only imagine what it's like when you have extra needs. You may need extra money to get here and to function effectively in this forum. So thank you all three for coming. Really appreciate it. Firstly, I assume some of you have been to more than one COP, or is this the first one for each of you?
I've been to Sharm el-Sheikh.
Yeah. And Sharm el-Sheikh in a wheelchair must have been horrible. It was definitely not set up for someone in a wheelchair.
It wasn't. It wasn't. After I went home, I wrote a long email to our sponsors. That's the Climate and Health Foundation. And I begged them, could you please allow me to bring someone?
Yeah.
Because it was really hard going with a colleague, and she was the one taking care of me literally, and it's not always nice to impose yourself on somebody, you know. So and it was really horrible. For anyone who was there, the paving at so many of the entrances to the buildings did not meet the building. There was a big gap. And this was pretty much every single major entrance. It was just appalling. Anyway, I've got a question for the three of you. If you take it individually, that would be great. Based on this COP's experience, any previous, what do you want as a disabled person to see at the next COP and the one after that and the one after that?
Thank you. And I think, first of all, I just want to thank the Climate Exchange Network, Australia, for your invitations, as well as the special thanks for the government of Australia for funding us to be here. It's a lot of appreciation. But I think if I may focus on your questions, you know, as I came here, I just kind of really think about three things. First of all, accessibility. Second, inclusiveness. And third, rights. Because so often, when we talk about one of the challenges thing here for people with disabilities, we have to understand their diversity. There are diversity, different type of disability, and different barriers. And in order for us to include and be inclusive, we must make sure we remove the barriers. And when we talk about inclusiveness, what do you mean about inclusiveness? So often we talk about, we design a program and also invite us to be part of it. But inclusiveness from our point of view, I have to be part of discussing the issue, be part of designing the program. It will accommodate my need, as well as making decision what it will affect ourselves. This is inclusiveness in my perspective. I don't know about your interpretation, but this is Rima's version. Yeah? Because there is no way you can end up and design program and thinking, assuming it will accommodate my needs. Nothing about us without us. Only us people with disabilities understand our challenges and understand how to catering ourselves the best. So my focus, as I mentioned, 3 areas on rights. If the whole world understand the paradigm shift, we are no longer based on medical models or charity models. We move up to social approach and social models and human rights approach. Where is our rights? Where is our voice? The full and effective participation of people with disabilities, it counts. And I guarantee you, if we are not going to translate the documents into action now to be more inclusiveness and make sure the full and effective participation of people with disabilities, I guarantee you by 2030, there's plenty of people still left behind, including us. And sometimes we just focus, in economic development. It's more costly to focus on make everything accessible for people with disability. But I tell you, if you think economically, it is more costly to ignore the needs of people with disability. Why? How much percentage of GDPs of every country goes to marginalized people, included us? If we make everything, if we remove the barriers and make everybody to be inclusive and full and effective participation, I guarantee you, we will all enjoy the world. And this is my expectation for this COP. How many years we get together, discussing issues and develop policies, and us no voice, we are not included, and focusing on marginalized people. But if we cannot translate document into action, what a waste of time and waste of money. Yeah. We need now to start make everything accessible and inclusiveness for everybody else. We have a call in Tonga in our organization: create a barrier-free and inclusive society for all. And that's my point. Us, we don't access to justice at all. People with disability still constantly discriminate. We are not equal recognition before the law. Where is our right? So I think I'm just about to the end of my transmission this afternoon, But I still have more to share. But my question is, when are we going to translate the document into action and make sure everybody included? And the voice and the full and effective participation of people with disability, it's very important. When we develop the policies, when we design the program, when we make everything to be more accessible for people with disability. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I've got to say, if we want better advocates for action on climate change, hang out with a few people in the disability sector. Incredibly powerful advocates. Amina.
Okay, so what I want to talk about is, with COPs, what I've noticed is all these countries coming over and take decisions, but how many of them have laws, disability laws? That is where the problem starts. And then how have they really implemented those laws? Climate change has been brought about by policies that are supposed to be used in the countries to be implemented. But most of these other countries haven't even mentioned persons with disabilities in their policies. And even if they had, it's not more than just a sentence. While maybe children, women, and older people are getting paragraphs, disability is just getting sentences. And unfortunately, it has also not helped in the disability community because most of our people don't even understand the importance of getting into the activism of climate change. So the government or other sponsors who are really inclusive, they are the only ones really supporting movements like this. If not, the government will not come out and do it because what? They think they have other issues. But the only issues is do not leave anyone behind and also try to accommodate everyone with their needs and their wants and their requirements. Because like everything has been said, disability is a community with so much diversity. COP is an international event. They shouldn't leave it only based on the country, the host country. It should be worked out the same way the airports are having the same standards. Then they should tell the country that this is the kind of standard is expected, not just relying on these countries to do what they can, because I know the experience I had in Sharm el-Sheikh. I know the experience I'm having now in Dubai. There is a difference, yeah? But there's still something missing because without having more people with disabilities coming to COP, it's still going to be, you know, we might come and talk today and then we don't see each other again until after a year. That is not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a continual thing because as much as we have diversity in disability, we also come from different locations. And different locations in climate change means different climate situations. So the main thing is because we are not much when we come to climate change, when we come to COPs. And if not because we really have very, very few foundations that are looking at the importance of our work. We would have been back home. We don't even know what COP means, you know? So it's really a good thing if maybe Australia can change the trend. Try train more people with disabilities, build their capacities, you know, and each region should have speakers that are going to talk about based not just on their disability, but from their own environment, because that is what is really going to help the papers work. Because you don't say something with a sentence and then you expect it to work. It's not going to work. We all come from different backgrounds, it's our government, you know, that is supposed to be at the forefront. But thankfully, this COP, more communities are really screaming and making sounds to be recognized. The indigenous people, the women, everybody. But don't forget the communities. Like I said, in COPs, government come. We may have a minister of environment coming, for instance. If tomorrow he gets posted to a different ministry, he's not going to talk about COP again. He's not going to talk about climate change again. So COPs really need to concentrate on communities. And when you concentrate on communities, then it means you will understand the justification there is in such communities, regardless with disability or not disability. But easily then, people with disabilities will be able to be recognized more, and their concerns will be more considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Daniel.
Nice speech.
Thank you.
So, thank you everyone for being here, listening to us. For me, it's a pleasure to be here and to share the floor with all of you. First of all, I want to say that this is the third COP for people with disability as a movement. No, in 26, at the COP26, we have only 3 persons with disability as an official movement of disability. Now in this COP, we have 45 people with disability, as the International Disability Alliance knows. So that's a progress, no? That's a progress that we see, but it's still not 100% accessible, inclusive for people with disability. As well, for example, in the room, in this floor, there is a deaf person, no? We have no interpreter. We have no official interpreter for that person. He has to bring his own interpreters, but if he hasn't the money to bring his own interpreter, how he can be here with effective participation? So that's the real thing that I want to say. We have to increase our accessibility measures and take care about the reasonable accommodations. And here we don't have reasonable accommodation for people with disability, and that's a real problem. That's a real problem because, well, we have to, then for the next COP in Baku, maybe the people with disability have to be in a seat on the table of the new decisions of the agreement statements. So, well, me as a technical professional in the projects in Latin America, we learn about build capacities and to take care about the reasonable accommodation from all people with disability, women, children, indigenous groups. It's important to take about because just in less than 47% of the countries around the world have policies for people with disability in their law. That's mean more than 50% of the country around the world has not law for people with disability in their policies. So we have to take care, we have to think about, we have to figure out about how the countries take measure at this moment, how their countries discuss about people with disability, but there's not a one person with disability or one official representative for people with disability in the table of the negotiation now in the COP. How we can take intersectional measures for people with disability, for indigenous groups, women groups, children's, and also for third world people with disability, because at the COP, the climate change measure or the climate change decision, it's taken for a global vision, not for the local vision. For example, in Venezuela, where I am, we have a lot of problems because we have issues, political issues, economic issues, security issues, and maybe the climate change is not a priority, but the problem is still here, and people with disability is still here. So what we can do is there's not person represent the people with disability moment in the table for take decision, for the final statement, for the final documents here in the COP. What is the real effective participation from them? So what I think that it could be better for the next COP is maybe take one or two people with disability to represent the movement in the table of the decision, in the table of the negotiation, because it's important to take about, it's important to think in intersectional climate change measures when you think in the final agreement. So, well, that's what I think, and that it could be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. That's great. Can I just check, Jeff and Jason, can you hear? Or are you reliant on the text?
We're pretty reliant on the captions. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move down a question from the questions I sent you. So I want to ask both of you initially on the video feed, what could civil society organisations outside the disability sector do to support what the disability sector wants to achieve here through the UNFCCC and ATCOPS?
Do you want to start, Jason, on that one?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I've just got it come through on the captions. Yeah, so I think that's a really great question, and thanks to all the colleagues in person. It's really great that there are disabled people there in the room. So I think in terms of essentially allyship, I think it really comes down to non-disabled organisations committing to being good allies to disabled people and our organisations in international climate advocacy and supporting our rights, both internationally and domestically, to thrive. And for me, firstly, that starts with building and tending to good relationships. And this means investing the time and energy and sometimes funding into having genuine relationships with disabled activists and organisations. These meaningful relationships are relationships that can foster social change, and they're built with trust over time. And I think it's important to recognise that in the theme of building relationships, I think it's important to say that disabled people have always been in these spaces. Spaces like COP, we're always here, even though we might not be visible to one another. And collectively, disabled community have been working every year since COP23 on a good momentum within the UNFCCC, and I think it's important to keep building capacity on good relationships, both internationally and from non-disabled organisations. And these non-disabled allies also need to recognise that this disability space exists within a different ecosystem, and it has nuances with it, and a lot of different frameworks and understanding. I think it's been mentioned on stage already that we're not a homogenous group. There's many different approaches and cultures, which is really critical to getting it right. And unfortunately, sometimes that can come hand in hand with a lot of organisations speaking over us or claiming to do work in our name. And this sets disability rights back. So building genuine relationships with a diverse range of disabled people for organisations that want to be allies would really help navigate this, so they don't fall into the trap of using disability as a tick box exercise for inclusion, which might undermine trust in the long run. So your relationships also need to be ongoing. As has been mentioned on stage, it's not just happening here at COP. At COP, our people are pulled in many different directions, and yeah, this can be a bit tokenistic at times, but to make things more inclusive, that has to be a longer-term project. And I think, Glenn, you and Ken are a great example of good allyship. With this event, we're pulling this together, and Ken provided my accreditation to COP26, and most recently you've supported me to attend the Canada conference, where we're able to start this discussion off for the event along with Jeff and hear really what's going on the ground in Canada. That interregional justice, climate justice support is really critical in weaving those good relationships. And of course, the best way to amplify the views of the disabilities sector is to help fund us so we can speak for ourselves. We talk about nothing about us without us, and we really do mean that literally. And there's no other the second best option for getting us into the room and speaking for ourselves. And so providing financial support to our disability organisations so we can show up and work on our own terms is one of the most meaningful ways to be an ally, because, as it's been said, there's still a large gap here of either understanding or support to be able to do this work. And I think disabled people innately understand this is an issue that we have to face, and making sure that capacity building and upskilling is happening is critical. So yeah, it's no coincidence that I'm calling in remotely today. Being on the ground for the previous 5 years at COP has been a huge cost, both financially, but also as a disabled person physically. It's really challenging physically as a disabled person, and yeah, my heart really goes out to everybody who was at the last COP. It was a very challenging accessibility-wise for myself as well. So yeah, as you've said, Glenn, travel costs and accessibility are significantly higher for most members of our community. and it's really important to help support these events that have virtual options as well, and to meaningfully partner with disabled organisations who are in the space to think about coming to what it means to come to the table of disability rights, to the table of all our organisations, to see things the way we do and build on the decades and generations of hard work that have taken our rights this far. I think that two-way approach to allyship is really important, that we're bringing more disabled organisations into the climate space, but equally climate organisations are figuring out how to support us in our worldviews and way of doing. So partnering for these is just as important for these high-level multilateral forums as it is domestically. And the work of making sure disabled people aren't left behind in every facet of society, particularly in climate change. This work happens year-round, day in and day out, not just at the COPs. The COPs are just one stop in a very long road for us. And that these kind of things can look like supporting and collaborating these events, releasing joint policy positions, looking at the ways of integrating our work with your work as climate organisations, but most importantly to show up at our table and to be part of our community, to support us to achieve our goals. And yeah, the last thing I'd like to leave you all with is remembering that allyship is a journey and not a destination. It's an ongoing thing to be continuously worked on. So, Yoda, thanks very much for having me this afternoon.
Always good to end with a cliche, Jason. Well done. I will hand to Jeff if you have a comment.
Yeah, just briefly. Jason, as always, has eloquently and comprehensively answered the question. But I just thought, just building on what he's saying around, that civil society organisations in Australia, if they can engage with us by listening, learning and engaging in good faith, then that goes a long way, I think. I mean, there's often a societal view, conscious or unconscious, about people with disability that they are the passive recipients of support, and that's the way that you need to relate to them. But one of the things that we have seen in this space, in the COVID-19 space, but also in the natural disasters or the unnatural disasters that we've been having in Australia in the last couple of years, is the extraordinary innovation of people with disability. And at some level that's a surprise to others, I think, but also it's once you appreciate that people with disability are problem solvers for every day of their lives. The speakers tonight have been talking about accessibility issues and how to get around, and you have to solve those problems because someone else is not solving them for you. And so in COVID-19 and in the bushfires and the floods in Australia, people with disability were the ones that were organising themselves. They were the ones that were setting up mutual aid associations where the government's programs were just not working. The government wasn't flexible enough, nimble enough, agile enough, but so people organised themselves on the ground. And so that was quite an extraordinary revelation, I think, in those events in the last couple of years. In the fires that we had in New South Wales, it was people with disability that set up a program which eventually went national called Find a Bed. And that Find a Bed program started out of the inaccessibility of evacuation centres in the midst of those natural disasters. And they eventually become programs that were, as I said, that went national, but also went and broadened out to include families, to include programs for pets and all sorts of things that went beyond finding accommodation for people with disabilities. So yeah, that's all. I think just adding on to that we need to reframe the role of people with disability as a positive and innovative source, and that's another reason why having that seat at the table is so crucial. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I think we need to acknowledge as Australians that we're very privileged. We have a wealthy nation. We have resources that most nations could only dream of. We have stable government. We have a willingness by the Australian public to invest in areas of greatest need. We have significant investment into supporting disabled Australians, and this is not the case for many countries, including our friends here at the COP who've made this incredible trip. I would like to end, we've got about 10 minutes. There is a prospect that Australia will co-host a COP in 2026 with the Pacific. That's 3 years away. If you could dream of, the three of you, the COP that you want to see as a disabled person coming to have the global conversation as advocates, talking about impacts, talking about fixing climate change, what would you like to see at an Australian Pacific COP in 3 years from now?
I think if I wrap up in two things, we won't like just to be like a beautiful flowers in a vase as a decoration, just to attending. Yeah? But the full and effective participations of people with disabilities have a voice, speak on their behalf, as well as a voice in decision making. Otherwise, there is nothing at all. But my expectation, this is my dream for the next COP, full and effective participations of people with disabilities, as well as have a voice. Let them speak on their behalf. So often, as most common in the Pacific, the carer speak on behalf of persons with disabilities. But persons with disabilities should speak on their behalf. Second, we must be part, we must have a voice, especially when it comes to decision making. Otherwise, there is nothing at all. We will be more like a beautiful flowers in a vase as a decoration. Thank you, we're done. Hallelujah, everything's okay. But it's not okay. We need a voice. We need to discuss. The challenge of climate change, it's really affected us. We are the marginalized people. We are the one affected the most when it comes to the crisis in climate change. Thank you.
That's really powerful, and hosting a COP is not just the event. It's a whole year as a presidency that the Australian government and Pacific nations would share, nation or nations would share, and there are multiple events all the way through, and I think that genuine participation all the way through and beyond COP31 is a dream that we definitely, as Climate Action Network Australia, would be helping drive with our partners. Amina.
I would really love to see more disability rights advocates and climate justice advocates in Australia. Australia is a huge country, and they have cultures, they have mass lands, and obviously different weather patterns. But most of all, what we would want to learn from other countries is how they have worked out, certain issues that has to do with disability being integrated, and mainstreamed, and making it a more inclusive country in every realm. So having an opportunity in Australia is not just going to, like you said, is already a country that is even helping other countries, and the government is good and all that. But with disability, it's not just something to just write on paper. The reality has to be there. And we would love to see that reality. Because we cannot say, for instance, coming to this COP to say, oh, there isn't any accessibility. We can't say that. But to a certain extent, there is. But there is also some gaps. But with Australia, you now have a chance. You sort of having a leakage of what to do next. You ought to do something different, like not like the other COPs and everything. And the more the disability community is recognized as a main entity, it makes it a lot easier for everyone. And therefore, the COPs in Australia should also have, you know, other, not just having the locals, but also innovations of what other countries can also see and go and learn, or even have decisions to be taken based on what they have presented during that time. Because of the simple solutions that they have gotten, other countries can also learn from it. So it's not just going to be a government kind of gathering or, you know, based on, but we are going to sit down and learn and share experiences and also learn what we have seen. So before then, it's now up to you guys to build the capacity of every disability right advocate that is into climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say first, Australia is a great country in the disability movement advocacy. Also, it's a great alliance of the International Disability Alliance. So, well, for the COP, or what I want to see, maybe if we have the opportunity to get a better participation and effective participation of people with disability, as my floor mate says, about and voice, but then we need an actions. We need a concrete actions taking about the reasonable accommodations, about the how the diversity of people with disability could be included in the all COP, no? Because, well, we have here few weeks the events and the activities and the decisions for people with disability. It's a little bit, well, it's not the main problem. I know it's the climate change, but the climate change included people with disability. And well, what I want to say is, what I want to see in the next COP, or in the Australian and Pacific COP, it's more participation for people with disability in the seat, in the table of the decision and the negotiations. Take care about the reasonable accommodation from people with disability, about the deaf person, about visual disabilities, about physical disabilities. Um, Three, it's build capacity for the personal who be there, who it's gonna be there as a technical supporters, and then maybe it could be what is the intersectional, and how the countries, or the first countries as Australia or as other countries, can think about the third world country, because the strategies, the action, the projects, it could be different. So we can have, as you say before, we can have a global strategy, a global agreements, a global measure, a global action. But what about the national, the local? Because in Africa, in South America, in Venezuela, we have another reality. We have other reality. We have a different situation. We have political issues. We have government issues. We have financial issues. We have security issues. Well, the climate change maybe for that government, for that state, is not a priority for those states. It's not a priority, but the problem is still here. We have environment, climate risk. We have environment disaster risk, and we have no idea to how we can handle it, how we can manage it. Even we don't have idea, so how we can manage for people with disability. So that's what I want to say. More capacity buildings from the first world countries to the third world countries, more capacity building for the personal or the technical personnel to be there in the COP, in the next COPs, more intersectional actions. So, well, thank you so much. That's what I wanted to say.
And can I say it's 2 o'clock, perfect timing, well done. I would like to thank everyone who has been involved. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.